It happened 3 years ago when I was 22 and fresh out of college. I had a job interview scheduled at an advertising agency downtown for 10 a.m., which would have been my first real job in my field. I left my apartment at 8 to give myself plenty of time, taking the subway because parking downtown is impossible and expensive. It was a Monday morning, so the platform was packed with commuters heading to work. I felt safe in the crowd. I was standing near the edge of the platform, going over notes on my tablet and reviewing my resume one more time, when I felt someone move extremely close behind me. Like, uncomfortably close. I could literally feel their breath on the back of my neck. I instinctively stepped forward, closer to the edge of the platform, but the person moved with me, maintaining that same uncomfortable distance. I turned around, ready to tell whoever it was to back off, and found myself face to face with a man in his 40s wearing a gray overcoat and a scarf that covered the lower half of his face. He was staring directly at me, and when our eyes met, he spoke quietly. "Nice suit." "Important meeting?" My stomach dropped. How did he know I had a meeting? I mean, I was dressed professionally, so it was a reasonable guess. But something about the way he said it felt wrong. I said, "Please give me space." He didn't move. His eyes flicked to my portfolio, then back. I pivoted so the bag was between us, slid left behind a couple holding coffees. He mirrored me. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to miss my train. The screen ticked down a minute. Someone bumped my shoulder. I slipped through a knot of people toward a column where a bunch of college kids were arguing about a quiz. I stood with them, pretending to listen and laughing at nothing. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd sleep-deprived spiraled a normal commute into a story. The train arrived. I boarded with the students and picked a window seat in the middle of the car. Portfolio on my lap, tablet away. I tried to switch gears, rehearse an answer about a campaign I'd built for a class. 2 stops went by. Normal noise. Normal morning. My shoulders came down a little. Then I felt that prickly watched feeling you get when you're sure someone's eyes are on you. I looked up like I was just stretching. He was there, sitting directly across from me, a few seats down, angled so he didn't need to turn his head. There were empty seats everywhere, but he'd picked that one, straight in my line. He wasn't scrolling or reading, just staring. The scarf still covered his mouth. I tried to logic my way out of it. People space out. People look through you. But each time my attention wandered back, his eyes were already waiting. No blink, no flinch. A stop later, I tested it. I watched him in the window's reflection like I was looking outside. He didn't shift. I pulled out my phone and opened a text so I'd look busy, typed to my sister, deleted it, typed again. I didn't want to dump panic on her without a plan. I thought about moving closer to the door, but that meant getting trapped in a corner if he followed. I glanced at the intercom and felt stupid. What would I say? A man is looking at me. The car jolted into the next station. Doors chimed. People stood. I stood too, went with the flow, and at the last second slipped through the connecting door into the adjacent car. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I took a seat near the far end, closer to the opposite door, phone in my hand. Through the glass, I watched the car I'd left. For a few seconds, I saw only elbows, backpacks, an ad for a dental clinic. I told myself he'd stay put because that's what most people do. Then he stood. He walked straight to the connector, opened the door, and came through into my car. He ignored the empty seats at the entrance. He walked down the aisle, slow and deliberate, eyes locked on me, and sat 3 rows behind me. I could see him in the reflected rectangle of the window. My heart was loud enough I wondered if the woman across from me could hear it. I lowered my phone so the screen wouldn't mirror what I was doing and typed, "On train. Man following me." Gray coat, scarf. I stopped there because I didn't know the exact station names by heart, and I wasn't going to twist around for the map. I deleted it. It felt like asking for help I couldn't use. The doors closed. We moved. I angled my body like I was reading the ad above the door and kept him in the reflection. He wasn't pretending to be on his phone. He wasn't pretending to do anything. Just staring. I thought about getting off and finding a conductor, but that meant stepping onto a platform with him right there. And if he caught my wrist and steered me toward a stairwell, who would register it? Staying felt safer. People are deterrents. That's what everyone says. I slid my portfolio under the seat so my hands were free. I tucked my hair into my collar. A couple stood and I shifted 2 seats forward, adding another row between us. 30 seconds later, he shifted too. Same distance. A man in a suit squeezed past and muttered, "Sorry." "No worries," I said too brightly. I looked at the route map and counted stops, like that was my biggest concern. Across the glass, 3 rows back, he was still staring. I was starting to panic now. This wasn't coincidental. This man was deliberately following me, car to car, and I had no idea what he wanted or what he was planning. I still had 4 more stops before my destination. I couldn't lead him to the building where my interview was. What if he followed me inside? What if he waited outside? I decided I couldn't risk it. At the next stop, even though it wasn't where I needed to go, I stood up and headed for the doors. As I stepped onto the platform, I glanced back through the window and saw him stand up too. I didn't run. I walked fast, portfolio tight to my side, toward the exit stairs. My heels clicked on the concrete, quick and sharp. Behind me, footsteps matched my pace. I looked back and he was there, maybe 10 meters behind, not hurrying, just keeping the gap. I moved toward a uniform near the tunnel entrance, a subway security guard with a radio clipped to his shoulder. I probably looked wild-eyed. I said, "There's a man following me. Gray coat, scarf." He followed me through cars and got off when I did. The guard didn't roll his eyes or ask if I was sure. He stepped slightly in front of me and looked past my shoulder. "Where?" he asked. I pointed, keeping my body angled so I didn't lose sight. "By the 4th car," I said. "He keeps staring." He was right behind me on the platform earlier. The guard lifted his radio. "Station to control. Possible stalking situation. Male in gray coat, scarf covering lower face. Check cameras." While he spoke, the chime sounded and the doors began to close. The man slowed when he saw me talking to the guard. He glanced at the guard, then at me, then turned back to the train. He stepped on at the last second as the doors shut. The train pulled out with him on it. I exhaled without meaning to. The guard lowered his radio and looked at me. "You okay?" "I don't want to get back on," I said. My hands were shaking. "Understood," he said. "Do you want to file a report?" "We can take a statement and alert other stations." I gave him the full story in order. The breath on my neck, the comment, the staring, the car switch, him getting off with me. He wrote down the description and repeated it over the radio. He said the scarf might make identification hard, but they'd pull footage. He offered to walk me to the exit and help me get a taxi, or wait with me for the next train if I wanted an escort. I checked the time. 15 minutes late already. The man was still visible, standing near the train, but when he saw me with the guard and the guard looking at him, he turned and got back on the train. The doors closed, and the train left the station with him on it. The security guard asked me if I was okay, if I wanted to file a report. I told him the whole story. The man on the platform, how he'd followed me through multiple cars, how he'd stared without blinking, how he'd gotten off when I did. He took my description and radioed it to the station security office, but there wasn't much else they could do. He offered to escort me to the exit and help me get a taxi or wait with me for the next train. I called the advertising agency from the platform and told the receptionist I'd had a security incident and would be late. She was calm and kind. "Take your time," she said. "Come in when you can, or we can reschedule." I decided to go anyway. I didn't want to let some creep derail this. The guard walked me upstairs and waved down a taxi. He waited while I got in and made sure the driver heard the address. The ride cost me $40 I really couldn't spare, but watching the mirror felt better than watching a reflection of him 3 rows back. I got to the interview about 30 minutes late, apologized to everyone I met, and forced myself to focus on the questions. Concrete answers, class projects, 1 internship. I felt my voice steady. Somehow, it went okay. A week later, they called me back for a second interview. I didn't get that particular job. It stung, but I was mostly relieved the day hadn't turned into something worse. The scary thing is, I never filed a police report, just told the station guard. I still wonder if they ever found him, or if he did this to someone else. Now I stay hyper-aware on trains, stand near staff, never let anyone box me at the edge, switch cars if someone locks onto me, and I don't ride early mornings or late nights alone. I live with my wife in a country house we've been renting for 3 years. I'm 33, she's 31, and we both commute into the city for work. But we like coming back to the quiet. The place is old but comfortable. Neighbors are a good 100 yards away. It creaks sometimes and we ignore it. That night felt different. I was in the living room on my laptop finishing a presentation. My wife had already gone to bed. Around 11:30, I heard a dull thud on the second floor. Not a creak, a drop. I went up. Our bedroom looked normal. She was out cold, face in the pillow, breathing steady. I checked the closet, the window latch, even the laundry basket, just trying to locate the sound. Nothing. I looked in the other rooms, the small office, the storage room with the boxes we never unpacked, the guest room we never used. Everything in place. No fallen frames, no open windows. I stood there a minute, listening, and told myself it was the house settling or heat ducts. I went back down. I picked up where I left off on the deck slides and tried to refocus. About 20 minutes later, I heard a tapping on one of the first floor windows that faces the garden. 2 taps, a pause, then 1 more. I thought maybe a branch, except there isn't one close enough. I walked over and pulled the curtain. Just dark glass and my own reflection. I couldn't see a thing outside. I grabbed a flashlight from the entry table, stepped onto the porch, and took a slow lap around the house. I lit up the corners, the shrubs by the downspout, under the kitchen window, the spot where the trash cans sit. No movement, no animals. The garden gate was shut like always. I listened for a minute, heard only the hum from the highway way off, and felt stupid standing there in socks with a flashlight. So I went back in and locked the doors again. Deadbolts. I checked them twice out of habit. I told myself to wrap up, sleep a few hours, and finish the notes on the train. I shut the laptop, killed the living room light, and went upstairs. In the bathroom, I turned on the shower, waited for the pipes to knock and the water to get warm. While it heated, I stepped into the hallway to grab a clean towel from the closet. The hallway light went out. It didn't flicker, it just died. I flipped the switch a couple of times. Nothing. I figured a breaker tripped. That happens when the space heater and the microwave run together. So I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and headed down to the basement where the panel is. The basement's unfinished and smells like dust, so I don't hang out down there. I walked to the breaker box, scanned the rows. None of the switches were thrown. I pressed each one down and back up anyway, the way my dad taught me. Still looked fine. I stood there a second, annoyed more than anything, and went back up. The hallway was still dark. I tried the switch again, then the one for the staircase. The kitchen light worked. The hallway didn't. I decided to check the bulbs in the fixture. Maybe both blew. Unlikely. But whatever. I pulled a chair from the guest room and set it under the fixture. While I stood there with the chair in my hands, I heard a quiet creak of floorboards from inside the guest room we don't use. The guest room door was closed. That creak was the kind you hear when someone shifts their weight near the window. It's a specific sound in this house. I put the chair down and stayed still. It occurred to me that I had locked the outside doors, but I hadn't checked the upstairs windows in every room. I told myself wind could move the old frames a hair, wood expands, all the rational stuff. My hand was already on my phone light again, pointed at the doorknob. I walked up to the door and froze, listening. Silence. I jerked the door open and shone my phone light inside. The room was empty, just old furniture. But the window was open and I distinctly remembered it being closed that morning. Cold wind blew in from outside. I walked over to close the window and heard footsteps behind me in the hallway. I spun around fast and there was a figure, a vague silhouette, but my phone died and the light went out. I yelled and rushed for the doorway, bumped into my wife in the darkness. She had woken from the noise. She said my name and grabbed my arm, and for a second we both stood still, listening. I told her, "Back up toward the stairs," and we moved slow with our hands out, trying not to trip on the chair I had left. I kept saying there was someone here, right by the guest room. She whispered she heard it too, the creak, and asked if the window had been open. I said yes. We reached the top of the stairs and I found the banister with my hip. The bathroom shower was still running. I told her I was going to hit the main lights downstairs so we could see what we were dealing with, and to stay right behind me. We went down together. We went downstairs together and hit the kitchen switch. Every light came on like nothing was wrong. The living room lit up. The hallway lit up. The bathroom upstairs kept running. She moved to the base of the stairs while I checked the back door a third time, then the garage door. Locked. I grabbed the heavy flashlight anyway, even though it was not needed now, and we started a room-by-room pass. We searched the office, the laundry nook, under the dining table, behind the couch. I opened the hall closet ready to swing, but it was only coats and the vacuum. No sounds now, except the shower we had forgotten to shut off. We went back to the stairs, and that is when she pointed at the floor. Wet, muddy footprints on the hallway boards, starting just outside the guest room and angling toward the stairs. The pattern was clear. Heel, then tread. Bigger than either of ours. We followed them down to the first step and lost them on the rug by the entry. We did not sleep the rest of the night. I turned off the shower and we sat at the dining table with every light on and my dead phone next to the flashlight. She made coffee because it felt like a task, but neither of us drank it. I used the landline and told the dispatcher we might have had a break-in. She asked if anyone was hurt, if we had seen a face, if any doors were open now. Answering felt dumb because we had nothing solid, just prints and the open window. "We will send a unit," she said. We waited by the front door until headlights came up the drive. In daylight, we walked the yard with the officer. Boot prints under the guest room window, pressed into the mud by the foundation. He took photos and asked about enemies, contractors, deliveries, anything unusual. We told him about the tapping, the light going out, and how the breaker looked fine. He shrugged at the wiring and said old houses do that, but he agreed someone had climbed in. They checked the crawl space and the basement and found nothing. No tool marks on the doors. No damage on the latches. He He suggested cameras and said to call if we noticed anyone casing the place. We spent the next night with the alarm armed in a chair under the guest room knob. I added a cheap bell to the chair so it would rattle if anyone pushed it. We changed the alarm code and made a plan. If we ever heard anything again, we leave the house first and call from the car. Logical, simple. Still, the house made us jump. A pipe clicked, and we both looked at the ceiling. A truck down the road set off a vibration, and we froze like idiots. We started looking at rentals online during lunch breaks, calculating penalties and deposits, weighing commute time against sleep. The question of who was in our house that night and what they wanted has not gone away. We still hear small sounds, and sometimes the alarm chimes when a door sticks, and I feel that same jolt. We are probably moving because I will not gamble on whoever thought our place was easy. It would be simpler if they had taken something, some reason we could point at. But there is not one. It is the open window, the dead hallway light, and the prints drying on our floor. Sometimes not knowing is worse than knowing. It stays with us every night we try to sleep at home. So when I was 11, I lived with my parents and younger sister in a small house in Minnesota, and we didn't have much money for entertainment. I was the kid who filled old coffee cans with rocks I found behind the school. Tiger stripes, sparkly bits, anything that looked different. On Wednesday, October 12th, 2005, my mom baked a birthday cake for my 8-year-old sister Lillian. We didn't go anywhere. Just dinner and cake at the kitchen table around 7. Dad did the candles and a goofy song. I remember because the knife dragged a chunk of frosting and he laughed and said, "Budget cake tastes the same." After we cleaned up, Mom told us to get ready for bed. Lillian tried to argue for one more slice and got the look. We went down the hall. I grabbed my toothbrush. The walls in that house were thin, like cardboard thin, and the bathroom vent carried everything. While I brushed my teeth, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. I didn't listen hard. Money, bills, the usual, but certain words stuck. "Second job," Dad said. "Warehouse on weekends." Mom didn't like it. She said, "You're already so tired." They weren't yelling, just that tight tone that means a fight if someone pushes. We'd been tight for months. It wasn't new. I spit, rinsed, walked back to the room I shared with Lillian. Our beds were in opposite corners because she kicked in her sleep. She was still buzzing from cake, but she quieted fast after Mom did the goodnight voices through the door. I lay there thinking about my rock cans and how I needed a better red one. Somewhere between that and staring at a crack in the ceiling, I fell asleep. Nothing weird, just a normal night. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to voices and knew they were Mom and Dad. It jolted me upright because it was too clear. Not like a TV through 2 rooms. This was close, like they were standing on the other side of the wall next to our beds. I looked at Lillian, who was face down in her blanket pile, breathing like a tiny old man. I listened. Dad was saying something about the weekend warehouse job, same phrasing. "It's just until January," he said. I recognized it because he'd said that exact thing earlier. Mom came back with, "You're already so tired from your regular job." The same shape, same quick inhale before, "already," like she was choosing her words. At first, I figured they couldn't sleep and moved the talk upstairs to their room. They did that sometimes with TV shows. If they both liked something, they'd watch it again in bed because nobody wanted the couch. So fine, they were talking. But something was off. The voices felt wrong in distance. If they were in their room, it should have sounded muffled through the ceiling. It didn't. It sounded like it was happening right through the shared wall. I sat there listening for a minute, trying to place them. Kitchen? No footsteps, no chair scrape, no clink of a mug. Bedroom? Maybe. The heat had kicked on once around 11. You could hear the duct ping. I didn't remember it now. It was just them and those exact lines. I replayed the evening in my head to make sure I wasn't mixing it up. I wasn't. He'd said January before. She'd said already so tired. The numbers matched too. He named an overtime rate. She asked about the car payment date. The pattern lined up like someone following a script, and it wasn't a continuation, it was a replay. Dad said, "We need to make it to January." And a few seconds later, I heard the exact same line with the same inflection. Mom responded, "But you're already so tired from your regular job." And I heard that line repeat too, maybe 3 seconds after I remembered it. I was hearing the same conversation from earlier, but live, happening again right now. I got out of bed slowly so I wouldn't wake Lillian and walked to the shared wall. I pressed my ear against it. The drywall was cool. The conversation continued and I could predict every response because I'd heard it all 7 hours ago. Mom's little laugh that wasn't funny, then quiet, then Dad's throat clear. It came in the same order, same gaps. Every pause, every sigh, every change in tone. It was identical. I whispered what, without meaning to. I thought through the obvious stuff. Maybe Dad had left the radio on. Maybe Mom was on the phone with her sister repeating it. But there was no phone cadence, no fillers, no new words. It was like they were playing a recording of themselves out loud at 2 in the morning. Only I hadn't seen any recorder, and we didn't have the kind of stereo that could do that. We had a cheap boombox CD player. I kept my ear there and tried to catch anything that broke the pattern. Nothing. When Dad paused earlier to do math in his head, he paused now, same length. When Mom said, "We can skip the car wash this month," she did it again, same half-joke landing flat. There was a soft thump through the wall like someone shifting on the bed. I felt it in my ear. Lillian snored and rolled over behind me. I didn't move. I was stuck there listening to my parents say the same sentences from hours ago, in the same order, with the same breaths. I knew what was coming because I'd stood in the bathroom with toothpaste foam in my mouth and listened to it the first time. Dad would mention the car payment. He'd say the date and how it lined up with the warehouse checks. He'd sound like he was convincing himself. My chest felt tight. I didn't think ghosts or anything like that. I thought vents and pipes and old houses and how sound does weird things. I thought about the heating ducts running along that wall and how they carried voices everywhere. Dad inhaled. That clipped prep sound he does when he's going to deliver a number. "We need to make it to January," he'd said. And I knew the next piece was the car. I pressed my ear harder, knuckles on the wall. I knew Dad was about to say something about the car payment, and then he did. Same words I'd heard through the bathroom wall earlier. I wanted to go into their room, but something stopped me. This creeping fear that what I was hearing wasn't right. It wasn't a normal late-night talk. It wasn't even an argument. It was a recording that didn't exist playing itself back in real time. And I had this dumb thought that if I opened their door, I'd find nothing. Like the voices would vanish, and I'd be standing there like an idiot. So I stayed where I was, ear against the wall, trying not to breathe too loud. I could time it. The pauses came when I knew they would. Dad's chair would have squeaked there, except there was no chair now. And Mom would have said, "We'll cut groceries." And there it was again, the same quick apology after it, like she felt bad hearing herself say it. I stood there for what felt long, and then counted my breaths to guess 10 minutes. The lines wound down exactly like before. The last bit, Dad saying he'd call the warehouse guy, and then the tiny silence after, that helpless one I'd heard while brushing my teeth. Then nothing. The house settled. Lillian mumbled and flipped her pillow. I waited another minute because I wanted to catch a stray word, any evidence this was a normal thing. Nothing came. The silence felt thick in a way I can't explain without making it sound spooky. But it wasn't that. It was like a TV turned off in the middle of a sentence. I got back in bed and stared at the ceiling, wide awake. My hands were cold and I tucked them under the blanket and just lay there watching the faint line of the doorway. I tried to reason it out. The heater vents, old wires, some weird neighbor thing bleeding through. But it was my parents' words from my kitchen. Word for word. I didn't sleep at all. My brain kept replaying the parts I could predict, which was all of it. In the morning, everything was normal. The kitchen smelled like toast and coffee. Lillian was cranky because Mom wouldn't let her have cake for breakfast. Dad looked worn out, but that was typical. No red eyes, no weird tension. I watched them closely to see if they had that after-argument distance. They didn't. Mom asked me to pass the jam. Dad asked if I'd filled out a permission slip left in my backpack. They looked exactly like parents who'd slept. I tested it without being weird. I asked, "Did you guys have trouble sleeping?" Mom poured coffee and blinked at me. "No, I slept hard," she said, and she laughed a little about being groggy. Dad nodded and said, "Out like a light." I was dead after work, I tried. "I thought I heard you talking," because maybe they'd admit to it if it was nothing. Mom shook her head. "Dream?" she said, not rude, just casual. That was it. The window closed. I dropped it because pushing would get me nowhere. I didn't push it, knew they'd say I dreamed it or heard something else. But over the next few months it happened again, maybe 5 or 6 more times. Always at night when I woke up for no clear reason. Always conversations I'd heard before, usually important or tense ones from earlier that week. Once I heard an argument from 2 weeks before, the one where Mom said we couldn't help my uncle again, running line by line, including the part where a fork hit the plate too hard. Another time, it was a talk about Lillian's trouble with a kid at school. Same calm tone, same "we'll talk to the teacher" ending. The sound was never fuzzy or dreamlike. It was present, like they were in the wall, and I could match it to the first time I'd heard it. I started keeping track, just in my head, not a notebook, trying to see if it tied to the heater or a certain time. Nothing lined up except that the original conversation had to matter, and I had to be the one who'd overheard it the first time. And then it just stopped. By the time I was 13, it was gone. I'm 29 now, and I've tried to label it something normal. Auditory stuff during puberty, brain misfires, stress loops. We had money problems, and I was listening in, so maybe my head got good at replaying it while I was half asleep. That explanation helps. I want it to be that. But I remember being fully awake, hearing the refrigerator hum downstairs, Lillian's bed creak, the dog tap the hallway, all of it anchored in the real house while the past talked through the wall. I've never told my parents or friends. I don't want to be the person with the weird story that sounds supernatural when it wasn't. I just want to know if anyone else has had their house hand them old words in the middle of the night when everyone swears they were asleep. So, when I was about 24, me and my coworker Ashley decided to hit the gym after a brutal shift. We both worked at a call center, and sitting in a chair for 8 hours left us restless. I remember the headset indent on my hair and how my lower back felt like a knot. Ashley's place was on the way, so we stopped there first for her to grab workout clothes. She ran inside, yelled something about 2 minutes, and I waited in my car scrolling Instagram and trying not to think about the pile of emails I'd ignored. On the way out, she rubbed her temple and asked if we could stop at the pharmacy near her house because she needed painkillers for a headache. The pharmacy was in one of those small shopping centers that looks half abandoned at night. I parked at the far end of the lot near a shut-down electronics store with a papered-up window and a faded "For Lease" sign. The only place still open was the 24-hour pharmacy in the corner. It was around 10 p.m. and the lighting was patchy. A few lampposts were dead, and the rest flickered like they were thinking about it. Next to my car was a white van with tinted windows and a cleaning company logo on the side. There were mops and buckets on the ground like someone had been unloading equipment and then got distracted. Ashley unbuckled, said, "You want anything?" And I said I was good, then watched her jog toward the bright sliding doors. I stayed in the car with the doors locked because that's just how I am in parking lots at night. I cracked my window a finger's width for air and kept my phone in my lap, screen on. Maybe 3 minutes went by. I was halfway through a friend's vacation story when I saw the back door of the van open in my side mirror. A man in dark coveralls stepped down and walked to the cargo area like he was looking for something. He moved like a guy who knew exactly where everything was supposed to be, which is why it stood out when he stopped and looked directly at my car, even though I wasn't doing anything. I went still. He stood there for what felt like a long time, maybe 20 seconds, just staring. No clipboard, no phone, no obvious reason to be focused on me. Then he started walking slowly toward my door. I swallowed and rolled the window down another half-inch, thinking maybe he wanted me to move if I was in his way, or warn me about a spill. Something normal. My hand hovered over the window switch. I had the keys in the ignition but the engine off, because I didn't want to sit burning gas for nothing. He got close enough that I could see the shine of something on his sleeve, probably cleaner, and I said, "Hey, am I in your way?" He didn't answer. He stopped about 3 feet from my door and turned around without a word. The whole thing felt wrong. Not dramatic, just the kind of wrong that makes you sit up straighter. He went back to the van and disappeared inside. I watched him in the mirror, trying to act like I wasn't watching him. He was moving boxes around, head down, quick motions like he'd lost something. A minute later, he came back out holding something metal that looked like a crowbar or a long wrench. Hard to tell in the weird light. And he started walking toward my car again, faster this time, like he'd decided something. My stomach dropped. I locked the doors again out of habit and double-checked the button even though I'd never unlocked them. I debated starting the engine and swinging out, but Ashley was still inside, and I didn't want to leave her stranded if this was nothing. I told myself to honk if he got weird, and I moved my thumb over the horn. He was talking now. Not clear words, more like he was projecting at me without actually saying anything useful. Whatever he was saying, the tone was bad. Angry, like I'd done something to him, and he was halfway through an argument I wasn't in. He reached my door and tried the handle immediately. No knock, no, "Hey," just grabbed it. The door didn't open because it was locked. He tried again, harder. I said, loud but not yelling, "I can't help you, please back up." He leaned down like he was trying to look past the tinted glass, then put his shoulder into it and yanked again. The metal thing in his other hand caught a strip of the rubber weather seal and tugged it a little, and that made my brain do this dumb calculation about repair costs in the middle of everything. I hit the horn, one long blast, and glanced toward the pharmacy doors for Ashley. No one came out. The man flinched, looked at the store briefly like he was checking for witnesses, then came right back to my handle and pulled again. I reached for my keys and fumbled them, dropped them, felt them wedge between the seat and the console. He was doing those short, sharp jerks now, like he was testing the lock or the hinge, eyes up and jaw tight, and I heard him say something like, "Open the door," only it didn't sound like a request. He braced his foot against the lower panel, gripped the handle with both hands, and started yanking the handle in quick jerks, getting more forceful each time. That's when Ashley came out of the pharmacy with a bag in her hand. The moment he saw her, he let go of the handle and walked quickly back to his van. Ashley yanked open the passenger door and slid in fast, breathing like she'd jogged a mile. She didn't look at the bag, just the mirror. I started the engine and pulled out, tires bumping the broken edge of the spot. I didn't look back. I didn't want to lock eyes if he was still watching. We didn't speak for a few minutes. The pharmacy bag kept crinkling in her grip. I watched the lights and put distance between us and that lot. When she finally talked, her voice was thin. She said maybe he thought I was an easy target because I was alone in a dark corner. Maybe he was planning a robbery or something worse. I said I was just glad I'd locked the doors without thinking. I told her I'd thought about starting the car sooner, but I didn't want to leave her inside alone. She said she saw him from the register, and he'd been yanking like he meant business. We both agreed the tool changed everything. He didn't come over to ask for help. He came back with something to pry or smash. We drove past the gym without saying it out loud. I turned toward her place because that made sense. We ended up skipping the gym that night, and I drove Ashley straight home. Both of us agreed lifting after that was a bad idea. Her complex had decent lights and a few dog walkers. I pulled under a working lamp. She asked if we should call the police. We went back and forth. We didn't have a plate, didn't have more than white van and dark coveralls, and we weren't sure what crime existed. He'd tried a locked door in a public lot. That was it. Still, we kept circling the same points. The way he stared before he approached. The way he turned, then went back to get that metal thing like he'd made up his mind. His voice when he returned, loud and angry, like he was arguing with me in his head. None of it felt like a misunderstanding. It felt deliberate. Ashley said she wished she'd grabbed the plate, but when she saw him pulling, her brain went straight to getting to the car. I told her that was normal and decided a vague report would go nowhere. I walked her to the entrance and waited until she was inside. Driving home, I kept replaying it and checked my doors at every red light. I took main roads, parked under a bright lamp, and scanned the lot before I got out. I checked the back seat twice because I was rattled. I put my keys in a small flashlight by the door and dug out the pepper spray to test the safety. I set a reminder to replace it and slept badly. The next day at work, we told a couple coworkers. One guy said, "It's a parking lot, weird stuff happens," like that covered it. Another woman said her sister had almost been carjacked the same way, and to start the engine the second you sit. That stuck, and I started doing it. I avoid that shopping center now. At night, I park under a light near people and lock my doors right away. Ashley moved 6 months later. She texted that the pharmacy shut down and the whole center is abandoned. I wonder what else happened there. About 15 years ago, when cell phones were rare and GPS didn't exist, I was 40 years old working as an accountant. That day, I was driving my two nephews, Kyle and Emma, back home to New Mexico from our aunt's funeral in Texas. The plan was simple. 6 hours, back roads, less traffic. We left around 5. The kids were out cold in the minivan by the second hour, shoes kicked off, seatbelts cutting across their little jackets. The road was a narrow ribbon through scrub and sand. Every few miles there'd be a sun-faded sign pointing toward a town I'd never heard of. The van was new. Dodge Caravan, 6 months, so I wasn't thinking about breakdowns. Around 7, with the sun sliding low, I saw it. An old gas station, rusty pumps, busted windows. The kind of place you only remember because it looks like a picture you saw once. I pulled in because the kids would need a bathroom soon, and I figured, worst case, there'd be a working sink. When I killed the engine and stepped out, it hit me that it was dead. Padlock on the door, bathrooms boarded, No trash cans, no vending machines, nothing useful. The only sound was the cooling tick of the engine and a flag rope clacking somewhere out of sight. I woke the kids, quiet, quick, and we walked the perimeter until we found a corner that wasn't awful. They were embarrassed, of course, but they went, and we got back in. I turned the key. Click. I tried again. Click, click. For a second, I thought I'd messed up and left the lights on. They were off. I watched the battery icon that wasn't even lit, which made no sense. I tried again, giving it a little gas because that's what my dad always did. Nothing but that dry starter click, like a pen with no ink. The kids were watching my face in the rear view, so I made my voice steady and said, "It's fine. Probably a loose thing. We'll try again in a minute." It was hot in the van. I cracked both front windows so I could hear the road. No cars passed. The light got flatter, and the edges of everything looked further away. I did the checklist in my head because that's how I am. Headlights off. No dome lights. No alarm stuck. I popped the hood and stared at the maze without touching anything. It all looked normal and wrong at the same time. I didn't see corrosion. I didn't see anything. I closed it gently and put the kids back with their seatbelts on because that felt safer, like I was doing something. "Don't worry," I told them. "Worst case, we wait for someone." The words came out too fast. Emma asked if we'd sleep here and I said, "No, we'll be home tonight." Like I could make that true by saying it. 20 minutes later, almost dark now, headlights crested the rise, and I felt this stupid relief that I could actually feel in my knees. A white pickup turned off and rumbled into the lot, slow, like the driver wasn't sure about the ground. He parked 2 spaces away from my van, angled so his lights washed both pumps and the front of my hood. Guy gets out, about 50, faded t-shirt, jeans, baseball cap that had sweat salt on the brim. He raised his hand, kind of a lazy wave. "Evening," he said, friendly and not too friendly. "Saw you sitting. Thought I'd check I kept my door half closed with my hand on it." "Thank you. It won't start. Just clicks battery or a bad ground," he said, like he'd seen it 100 times. "Pop the hood?" I hesitated one beat, and then pulled the lever because what else was I doing? Waiting for a miracle. He lifted the hood and set it against the crooked prop. I stayed in the driver's seat with my feet planted, watching him through the gap like you watch a pot that might boil over. He leaned in. I could see his forearms, tan with old nicks. He touched the battery, wiggled something. Metal tapped metal. He didn't talk for a moment. Then a small, like a mechanic who doesn't want to scare you. "Loose terminal," he called out. "Common on these. Whoever last touched it didn't tighten it right." He was still half bent under there. I could only see his hands and the lower part of his shirt. He tapped again and something rattled. "You been on rough roads?" he asked, casual. "Back roads," I said. "From the funeral." He didn't react to that. "Yeah. Vibration'll do it." He reached into his pocket and I sat up straighter. Ridiculous fight or flight hitting me even though it was just a pocket. He pulled out a small flashlight, the kind with a rubber ring around the head, clicked it on with his thumb, and stuck it between his teeth so he could use both hands. The light jittered. He said through his teeth, "It's just a dirty contact. Not a big deal." Behind me, Kyle whispered, "Is he fixing it?" I said yes, because that's what it looked like. The man twisted the cable and then let it fall back. His hand disappeared for a second and came back with a short, flat tool, or maybe it was just a key ring. He tapped the side of the battery again. "Best to clean it so it won't happen again," he said. "But I need a second set of hands." He stepped back an inch and lowered the flashlight. "Can you come hold this beam for me?" Right here, I was about to get out, hand on the door, when the kids both said they were thirsty. It wasn't whining exactly, more that flat, tired voice kids use when they're done. I told the man, "1 second, I'll grab water from the trunk." He said, "Go ahead," without looking up. I walked to the back, kept the door in view, and dug around in the bag until I found 2 bottles. While I was tearing the seals, he kept talking under the hood. Little mutters like, "There you are," and "Hold still." And then it went quiet. I handed the bottles through the sliding door and told them small sips. I closed the trunk and turned around. He was standing straight now, next to the open hood, holding something long and shiny in his hand. It looked like a big syringe without a plunger, or a needle for something you never want to be around, about a foot long with a metal tip. He stared at it for a second with this focused look I didn't like, too thoughtful, like it meant something to him. I heard myself ask, "What is that?" He rolled it in his fingers and said, "Calm." Was lying right on the engine, under the air filter cover. "That yours?" I said I'd never seen anything like it. He set it on the hood, metal on metal, and said he'd try a jump now, grabbed for his keys, and walked back to his truck. While he went for the cables, I stepped closer to the hood because if something weird was sitting there on my engine, I wanted to see it up close before it vanished. It was a straight metal tube with a very sharp tip, not a factory anything. More like something someone made in their garage. The seams weren't clean. There were shallow scratches and a couple of dark spots that looked wiped, like someone had scrubbed it with something and missed corners. I put my hands on the edge of the hood so I wouldn't touch it. He came back carrying red and black cables and didn't look at the thing again. He clipped the clamps to his battery, then mine, told me to try it. I turned the key. The van gave a solid crank and caught on the second rotation. Relief hit so fast my hands shook. I said, "Thank you," and reached for my purse to pay him because that felt right, and also I wanted a clean ending to this. While I was looking for bills, he came to my window and kept his voice low. "Ma'am," he said, eyes on the hood. "That thing wasn't sitting there by accident. It was put there, and not long ago. It's not for fixing cars. If I were you, I'd call the police when you get to town." My stomach went cold, like I'd swallowed a stone. "What do you mean?" I asked. He just shook his head once, like he wasn't going to get into it in front of the kids or on the side of the road. He took the money I held out, not counting it, walked back to the hood, lifted the tube with 2 fingers like it might smear, slid it into a small paper sack from his truck, and handed it to me through the window. "Police should see this," he said. "No drama, just that." We said thank you and goodbye. He turned his truck toward the way he'd come. I went the other direction. The kids were out in minutes. I kept my hands locked at 10 and 2 and kept the speed up until the first lights of town showed. At home, I called the sheriff's office right away and told the whole thing start to finish. The duty officer sounded like it was the middle of the night at a desk he didn't like. He said, if I wanted, I could bring it in and they'd take a look. But from my description, he couldn't say anything. Next morning, I took the bag to the station, filled out a form, and they logged it. Nobody called. Weeks went by. I never learned what it was. Maybe somebody's useless invention. Maybe something worse. I think about it too much. I keep circling back to that exact minute at the station, the kids asking for water, me walking to the trunk, him going quiet. And I can't shake the thought that if they hadn't spoken up when they did, and I'd climbed out right away and leaned under that hood like he asked, before that man arrived, I don't know how it would have ended. Back in spring of 2021, me and my cousin Travis ran a blog about abandoned places. Starlight Inn was on our list for 6 months, but we kept putting it off because the place was far from the city. The motel sat by the old highway, which stopped being used after they built a new one 2 miles west. It closed down in early 2000s and had been falling apart under the desert sun ever since. Saturday, we finally decided to go. Travis brought his girlfriend Emily, who did professional photography for the blog, and I invited my friend Rob, who liked exploring these places and was useful when we needed to climb through tight spaces or pull ourselves up somewhere high. We arrived around noon when the sun was beating down so hard the air shimmered over the asphalt. We pulled off the empty 2-lane and sat for a minute with the AC on low. The main sign had lost its plastic panels, so the metal frame just rattled in the wind. I was 24 and felt weirdly nervous, like we were walking into somebody else's memory, not a ruin. Travis said, 15 minutes tops in each building. If it's sketchy, we back out. Emily nodded without looking up as she checked batteries. Rob grinned and cracked his knuckles like this was a gym. I kept thinking how we'd put this off because of the distance, but if I'm honest, we also all had a feeling about it we didn't say out loud. No reason, just that thin, off feeling I've learned to listen to. The motel was a long single-story building with a row of rooms facing the parking lot and a separate reception building with broken windows. We parked in the shade of the only tree on the property and started with the office. Inside, everything was covered in dust and sand that wind had blown through the broken windows. Old registration desk, faded tourist brochures, rusty cash register, plastic chairs with cracked seats. Emily took photos trying to catch how sunlight came through dirty windows, creating dramatic shadows. Rob found a set of room keys behind the desk and suggested checking out the rooms, though most doors were already open or torn off hinges. We left the office and walked along the row of rooms. A few steps in, I noticed footprints. Not clear ones, just scuffs in the grit that weren't ours. Fresh enough to show shapes before the wind erased them. I mentioned it. Travis shrugged but slowed down. Could be ours from 5 seconds ago, he said, then looked back at the straight line of our prints and the older ones curving off to a side door. We kept going. A bird flapped out of a broken vent, and Emily cursed, laughed, and reset her focus like nothing rattled her. Rob said we should split, him and me one direction, them the other, then caught himself and said, "Nah." Together we kept to the outside walkway and tried each door we passed. Most rooms were trashed, mattresses folded like tacos, busted TVs, a weird smell of old cigarettes and mouse piss. Travis kept time on his phone. 8 minutes, move. Some were empty, others had beds with shabby frames, nightstands, broken TVs. In one of the middle rooms, I noticed the bed looked relatively clean. There was a sleeping bag on it, plastic water bottles nearby, some canned food, and a camping stove. The floor was swept too, and a damp t-shirt hung on the wall like someone had recently washed clothes. I called the others, and we carefully entered the room. Travis checked the sleeping bag. It was warm, clearly used last night or this morning. In the corner stood 2 large duffel bags, but we didn't go through them, realizing some homeless person or drifter was living here. Emily suggested leaving, said she didn't want to run into whoever owned this stuff. We agreed with her. Rob lingered for a couple seconds looking around the room, then followed us out. Nobody said anything on the walkway. We kept a steady pace, not fast, not slow, like we were just bored of peeling wallpaper and dead TVs. Emily slipped the camera strap across her chest and zipped the bag so it didn't swing. Travis kept the room keys Rob had grabbed earlier in his palm, then tucked them onto a windowsill so we weren't walking around with anything that looked like it belonged to someone else. "Last few doors and we're out," he said, not loud. We passed one room that smelled like oil, another with a bathroom door jammed halfway closed. I remember thinking about the sleeping bag's warmth and doing the math. Morning use meant whoever stayed there had a pattern. People with patterns return. As we approached the last room in the row, Rob suddenly grabbed my sleeve and nodded toward the parking lot. I looked and saw two men who came around the corner of the building. One was tall in a dirty work jacket, the other shorter in a baseball cap and sunglasses. Both carried what looked like bags or bundles. But the important thing was the tall one held a gun in his right hand hanging by his thigh as he walked. It wasn't pointed, but it was there. Travis immediately turned around and quietly told us to go back to the car without attracting attention. Walk naturally like we just finished our photo shoot. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at our car. No rush, he added, like he was reminding himself. We turned and moved. Emily slid her hand into mine for a second, squeezed once, then let go to hold her bag with both hands. Rob drifted slightly behind me, body big enough to screen Emily if he had to. We hit the brake in the walkway and took the direct line to the car. I kept my eyes on the windshield, using the left edge to track motion. The two guys didn't speed up. The tall one adjusted his grip on the bundles with his free hand, the gun still low. Shorter one looked at us, then away, then at the door numbers. They had a destination, and it wasn't us. Relief is tricky because it makes you sloppy, and I forced myself not to exhale like I was done. We slowly walked to our car, trying not to look at those two, and I could see from the corner of my eye they headed to that same room where we'd found the sleeping bag and duffel bags. Emily put her camera away with shaking hands, and we got in the car, trying to do everything calmly. "Seatbelts," Travis said, and that normal word sounded strange. He turned the key. The engine caught, and he let it idle for a beat instead of gunning it. Rob said, "Windows up," and I hit the switch. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want eye contact to become a thing. We rolled forward like we were just done with a boring place. At the exit to the lot, Travis used his blinker, habit, or maybe his brain needed something automatic, and we turned toward the old highway. I looked once. The two men had reached the room. The tall one nudged the door with his shoulder, gun now tucked close against his leg, and the cap guy scanned the lot. He paused on our car as we pulled away. I saw my own hands on my knees, whitening at the knuckles. No one said a word until the motel shrank in the dust behind us. Travis kept it a few miles under the limit. After about 5 miles, he said, "We good?" Rob answered, "Yeah," but it sounded like a question. Emily blew air out through her nose and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Then we talked. Not fast, and not dramatic, just laying out what we'd seen so we didn't make it bigger or smaller than it was. 2 men, gun visible, bags. The lived-in room. Drugs, Rob guessed. Could be stolen phones, parts, whatever, Emily said. I said, either way, that was theirs, not random. Travis nodded and kept driving. He didn't suggest calling anyone. No plates, no names, nothing solid to give. And we all knew the kind of trouble that comes from being the curious strangers who stick around. We never published photos from that trip and removed the place from our list, agreeing not to go back there. I told my dad I wasn't into desert spots for a while, which he didn't question. We skipped the usual post about history and decay and what time forgot, because time hadn't forgotten that place. Someone was using it right now. I still like exploring, but I think about the way the gun hung loose like an appliance, not a threat, and how that's worse. The risk isn't the big chase scene. It's the small decision to pretend you didn't see anything and leave before you become part of someone else's plan. I found her for the 3rd time in an hour. The same tall blonde in a leather jacket, sitting in a dark dressing room, even though the show had ended 45 minutes earlier. Now I'll explain why that was so strange. I work as a tech at a mid-size venue downtown, and my shift doesn't end until the building is empty. That night an indie band played. Packed crowd, good energy, but by midnight everyone was gone except crew and 2 guards downstairs. My job, walk every backstage room before we lock up. The first time I saw her was around 11 in the hallway behind the stage. She said she was waiting for a friend in the band. Fine. Happens. 20 minutes later, same girl at the service exit. When I asked if she'd found her friend, she turned away without a word. Rude, sure, but not unheard of. Then I opened a dressing room and she was there on the couch in total darkness. I hit the switch. We're closing. You need to head out. She didn't move. She stared at a phone, but the screen was black. No lock screen, no glow. Just the dead reflection of the ceiling light. I repeated myself louder. We're closing now. She lifted her head, locked eyes with me, and smiled. Big, slow, like she was testing how far her mouth could stretch. It wasn't cute. It was wrong. I stepped back into the hall and called for my coworker, Marcus, who was checking cables 2 doors down. We came back in under a minute. The room was empty. No bathroom, no second door, just the couch and a mirror and a rack of jackets from the opener. Marcus smirked. Drunk fan. She bounced. Relax. He went back to strike. I tried to shrug it off, but that smile sat heavy in my chest. I did a proper sweep. Women's restroom, green room pantry, 2 stairwells, props closet, nothing. Each space empty enough that my footsteps sounded too loud. I told myself she'd slipped out while I was grabbing Marcus, but that didn't line up with how quickly we returned. Still, I kept moving, checking off rooms like I always do because procedure is what keeps things from getting stupid. Downstairs, I found Dave at the front desk. There's a girl still inside, I said. Tall, blonde, leather jacket. Won't answer questions. I think she's hiding. Dave rolled in his chair to the monitors and started scrubbing through the cameras. We watched her come in with the crowd at 8-something. We watched the lobby empty. We watched staff leaving one by one. No shot of her going out. No side door exit. No alley. Nothing. Okay, Dave said, standing. Let's go. He's the type who doesn't make drama when a simple walkthrough solves it. We split up to save time. He headed for the auditorium rows. I took the offices and the equipment floor on 2. I've done that route 100 times. The quiet can mess with you if you let it, but I don't. Count doors, check locks, move on. When I opened the equipment room, I heard motion in the far corner. Not a rat, not a drip. Weight shifting. Something bumped wood against metal, like someone nudging a stack of crates. I hit the main light. She was behind the stand rack, half hidden by mic stands and flight cases. Standing still, chin up, eyes on me like she'd been waiting for that light. "Why are you hiding?" I asked. "What do you need?" My voice tried to be calm and landed shaky. No answer. She stepped out into the open. 1 step, another. No hurry. Nothing aggressive on paper, but it didn't read normal. People who need help say so. People who want to leave ask where the door is. This was neither. She watched my hands more than my face. I noticed that and tucked my keys into my pocket because suddenly it felt like a bad idea to have them out. "Security's on the way up," I told her. Not a threat, just information. "You can walk with me, or we'll walk you out together." She drifted her gaze past me to the door, and then right back, like she was measuring distance and timing. The jacket was the same one from the hallway. Clean, expensive, not typical hammered fan gear. Her hair looked salon done even after a show night crush. I know how people look after concerts. She didn't match the pattern. I shifted so the door was to my side instead of at my back. Look, I don't care why you stayed. We just need to close. Let's go. Another step. She was inside the boundary where people either stop to talk or push through you. I didn't smell alcohol, didn't see glassy eyes, just that too wide smile from before, tucked away now, like it could be pulled back out if needed. She kept staring at my chest, like she was reading a tag. We don't wear name tags. My radio cracked on my hip, Dave's voice, muffled, but I didn't reach for it. Her attention ticked to the sound, then to my hand, then back to my face. I decided I wasn't giving her an excuse to lunge for anything. Do you have a friend here? I tried again. Someone I can call? Practical questions. It's the only way you get people to move. She finally spoke. You work here. Flat, like stating the weather. No question mark, no interest. Yeah, I said. That's how I can help you leave. She took another step. We were a couple of arm lengths apart. No yelling, no sudden moves. Just a sense that the room had shrunk around us. Behind her, a half-open road case sat with gaffer and cutters inside. I pictured the blades and then got mad at myself for even thinking about what was inside a case that should have been shut. Stop there, I said. Calm, clear. We're done in here. We're going downstairs. Her eyes flicked to my left, to a gap between racks. Her heel angled like she might bolt that way. I realized two things at once. The gap led deeper into the maze of cases, and I was the only person between her and a whole lot of places to hide. I understood that I did not want to be in this room with her by myself. I stepped out fast and slammed the storage door, kept my hand clamped on the handle from the hall side. No inside lock on that one. I radioed Dave and gave the exact spot. Second floor, equipment storage, east wing. He said he was coming with a partner. I leaned my weight into the door and held it. Inside, she moved. Not pacing. Small shifts, a scrape, careful weight. She didn't try the handle. That bothered me more than if she had. I told her security was coming. Nothing back. About 2 minutes later, Dave and the other guard came up the stairs at a jog. I let go. They swung the door open and hit the lights. No one. The room had one exit, the one we held. No windows. The vents were narrow strips you couldn't put a forearm through. Dave walked the aisles slow, peered under the bottom shelves, lifted the skirting on 2 cases, checked behind the stand rack. Absolutely empty. The air felt flat, like a trick had happened and we'd missed the move. You sure it was this room? He asked. Yes, I said, steadier now that I wasn't alone. Same rack, same stands, same road case, same tape on the floor. He shrugged, wanting a simple box to put it in. People mix up doors in these halls. He wasn't condescending, just practical. We went methodical after that. 3 of us, floor by floor. Dressing rooms, offices, loading dock, green rooms, catwalk access, the little wardrobe closet no one remembers until tour days, bathrooms and utility cages, the broom closet with the busted hinge. Nothing. Every lock set, every hall clear. Auditorium rows empty except for wristbands and a hoodie we tagged for lost and found. Downstairs, Dave scrubbed the feeds again. We watched her come in with the crowd. Clear as day, leather jacket, hair, hands tucked in. We watched the show end and the lobby drain. No exit clip matched her. Dave rubbed his jaw. Second floor service exit has a blind spot. If she was smart, she could have timed it. It didn't match the door I'd held shut, but the cameras were what we had. We had to close. I signed the checklist near 3 and headed out, and that smile kept looping in my head like a bad jingle. A few days later, between load-ins, Another guard, Nate, said someone had jimmied a few dressing rooms the week before. Police were looking for a suspect, blonde in a leather jacket. I told him exactly what happened with me and Dave in the storage. He said he'd pass my notes to the detective. He asked if she'd said anything useful. I told him she barely spoke, just watched my hands like she cared more about what I could open than what I was saying. He made a face at that and wrote it down anyway. No one from the police called me. Weeks went by. Dave said they'd asked for more footage, but there wasn't any to give. If she used the blind spot exit, either someone let her into that stairwell earlier, or she'd studied the corridors enough to work around us. That idea stuck because it meant this wasn't random. People don't show up 3 times unless they're testing timing, seeing who's posted where, learning how long doors sit open before a latch catches. And that storage, she went there on purpose. That wasn't a fan mistake. Gear is locked, but not everything is locked equally. Mic capsules, wireless packs, small hardware. If you know what to grab, it adds up fast. Or maybe she wasn't after gear. Maybe she wanted a drawer in the office next door, a safe, a laptop, or a keyring. Mine, Dave's, the night manager's. She watched my hands like she wanted to see if I'd pull something I shouldn't leave out. Nate later asked if I thought she was dangerous. I said I didn't know. I just knew I didn't want to be in a room with her alone. He nodded. Police never found her. The break-ins got a line in a neighborhood email and then went quiet. I still work there. I still walk the same halls at close and call last sweep on the radio. Sometimes I open that storage and hit the lights, and my body does that small brace without me thinking about it. I keep thinking about that slow smile when I told her to leave, how it didn't look defiant or friendly, more like a person confirming a plan. I tightened my own habits after that. Keys clipped, doors closed behind me, no shortcuts. Maybe she used the blind spot. Maybe she learned the building better than we thought. The part that sticks isn't the cameras or the empty room. It's how calm she was when I drew a line, like my line didn't matter at all. When the gray sedan rolled into the car wash for the 3rd time that night and the guy just stood there staring at my office, I knew something was seriously wrong. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was alone at this 24-hour self-service car wash in the Portland suburbs, doing inventory and checking equipment. The first time the sedan showed up was around midnight. Driver got out, walked around his car for maybe 10 minutes, didn't use any of the wash bays, just left. Second time was an hour later, same deal, except he came up to the office window and stared inside while I pretended to be busy with the computer. Now he was back. When I checked the monitors, I saw him get out with a dark hoodie up. He wasn't moving toward the payment machine. He stood in the bay facing the office, and even without seeing his face, I felt him watching me. I'm 28 and the assistant manager here, which mostly means I fix coin jams, clear hoses, and keep the place from falling apart when the night guy calls out. Tuesdays are slow. I like slow. But this wasn't normal slow. This was quiet in a way that makes you start listing exits. My boss's line, "Don't be a hero," kept repeating in my head. We'd had a couple coin boxes pried open last fall, and one guy tried to yank a vacuum canister out with a tow strap. Nothing like this. I kept the door locked and pretended to type. He didn't move. He just stood there. Finally, I decided to go out and ask what he needed. Maybe tell him we were closing for maintenance. I figured keep it routine, keep it boring. I clipped my radio to my belt, pocketed my phone, grabbed the small mag light. When I opened the office door, he turned around fast and started walking toward the exit without looking back. His car stayed in the bay, engine running, headlights on. "Hey, wash is closing. You gotta move your vehicle," I called. He didn't answer. He cut across the shadow by the vending machine and disappeared around the corner of the building next door. I stood there a few seconds, felt stupid standing alone on wet concrete, then went back inside and locked the door. 10 minutes went by. The sedan still idled with the lights throwing that flat white across the bay. 15 minutes. I pulled up each camera feed, one by one. Nothing but his car and the empty bays. I started a tow request on the dispatch page, mostly to feel like I was doing something, and hovered over the phone because this is the point you involve someone else. Then I saw movement on camera 6, the fence line behind bay 3 that borders an abandoned lot. I zoomed the feed. Someone was walking along the fence, feeling at the mesh, checking for slack. Same build, same hoodie. He wasn't looking at the machines now. He was looking for a way in behind me. My heart started pounding hard enough that I had to sit. I locked the office door again, deadbolt and the top latch, and dialed 911. I kept it simple. Alone on site, male in a hoodie, car running, now trying to climb our fence. The operator confirmed the address and asked if he had a weapon. "I don't know," I said. She told me to stay on the line, keep eyes on the cameras, and not to go outside. "I'm inside and locked," I said. We both listened to me breathe while I watched him test the chain link by the dumpster. He found a spot where the fence bowed. He jammed a foot in and climbed fast. By the time I said, "He's over," his shoes were already hitting our gravel. The operator said a unit was on the way. And then, while I was still on the call, a loud crack hit the glass like metal on a windshield. The big office window facing the bays went white with fractures. He'd thrown something at it. Looked like a lug wrench on the ground, hard to tell. The pane didn't blow out, just crazed into a spider web. I flinched back and pulled the phone cord with me. I ducked behind the shelving with the chemical jugs and kept my eyes on the monitors. On camera 1, he was already at the door, a crowbar in his hand. He swung 3 times, fast and mechanical. The metal frame bent, but the lock held. Each hit thudded through the door, through the floor, into my knees. The dispatcher told me, "Stay low, stay away from openings." I said, "He's on the door. He's trying to breach." She said the officer was close. I believed her because I had to. He stopped hitting the door and moved to the window. He slid the hooked end of the bar into the cracked glass and raked. Chunks rattled down onto the sidewalk. He wasn't rushing now. He was methodical, clearing a hole he could reach through. On the edge of the camera frame, I watched his sleeve and glove sweep glass out of the track like he'd done it before. Our glass is security laminated, but once it's crazed, you can push through if you're patient. He was patient. I didn't want to be a hero. I wanted time. I reached up without standing and grabbed the big ABC fire extinguisher off its bracket. I pulled the pin. The operator heard the clink and said, "Do not engage. Back away and secure yourself. Copy," I said, even though I'm not a cop. I slid along the floor on my hip, keeping the shelving between me and the window, extinguisher in both hands like a shield. He knocked more glass free. I heard one last pop as a strip gave way. I kept moving. I backed into the far corner where the maintenance room door is and felt for the knob behind me without looking away from the monitors. My back hit the cinder block. The maintenance room had thick walls and a solid lock, but no exit to the outside. I locked myself in the maintenance room just as I heard him climb through the window and land inside the office. The door's heavy, the kind you kick once and feel it in your ankle, so I trusted it more than the window. He walked around out there, knocking over chairs, muttering low like he was arguing with someone I couldn't hear. I stood with my back against the wall, extinguisher up, thumb on the lever. He tried the handle and it clicked against the latch. He pushed harder. Nothing. Then he said, way calmer than his footsteps sounded, "Hey man, I just wanted to talk." "Why are you hiding?" I saw you looking at me. You know who I am, right? I kept my mouth shut. I could taste dust. My phone was still on with 911, the dispatcher asking if he was still there. I couldn't answer without giving myself away, so I just breathed and tried not to bump the door. He knocked again, slower this time, like a test. Then his shadow moved under the gap and disappeared. Chairs scraped across the office floor. Something metal toppled and hit tile. I tried to listen for the car outside, but the engine noise had blended into everything. I counted to 20 and then 30, the way they tell you to do in first aid, and then I stopped because my counting got loud in my head. The silence stretched. I thought maybe he'd left. I leaned an inch toward the door to check the frame camera, and that's when the sirens finally cut through from the street. They were close, shouting, real voices, not in my head. Police! Hands! Boots hit the concrete outside, more yelling, and then a pound against the office door that wasn't him. I was still frozen in the corner when a crash shook the room. Something heavy knocked over, followed by a scuffle and that deep grunt people make when they're losing. The dispatcher told me to stay where I was. I did. I heard a taser crack, or maybe it was just a baton hitting metal, and then the yelling turned clear and steady the way cops talk when they're cuffing someone who's no longer fighting. A minute later, there was a knock at the maintenance door. Police. You're safe. Do not open until we tell you I said I was inside and alone. They asked my name and had me repeat it. Then, we've got him detained. Slowly open the door and keep your hands where we can see them. I set the extinguisher down, hands up, turned the deadbolt, and opened it a few inches. A uniform filled the gap. He looked past me first, then at me. You hurt? I shook my head. He had me step out while another officer cleared the room behind me. My legs felt rubbery and I hated that, but I walked. They had the guy in handcuffs on the floor by the office desk, 2 officers holding him while a third picked up the crowbar and bagged it. He was breathing hard, hoodie half off, face blank in a way that didn't read drunk or high, just empty. His sedan still idled in the bay with the door open, headlights burning. An officer told me they'd secure the car and run it. I kept staring at the broken window and then the hole he'd cleared. I remember thinking how slow and careful he'd been with the glass, like he had all night. They loaded him into the patrol car. Another cop, older, walked me through what they needed. License, brief statement on scene, then I could finish the longer one later. He told me the guy had a folder in the car. Photos. Employees. Me walking across the lot a few different nights, a couple taken from the sidewalk, one through the office window where I'm leaning over the register. The dates looked like weeks, not days. He said the guy had been under psychiatric care, had stopped taking medication. He said it like a fact, not an excuse. They asked if I'd noticed him before. I tried to think back. Maybe he'd come through a few times and I didn't clock him because people blend together when you're closing. I said no, not really. By 4, the scene was mostly cleared. I swept glass into a trash can because standing still made me feel worse. The officer told me I didn't have to, that the manager could handle it in the morning. But I needed to do something normal. I finished out the shift sitting in the maintenance room with the door open, extinguisher at my feet, and the monitors up high. Dawn made the place look less like a trap, but I didn't trust that feeling. My manager rolled in early, took one look at the window, and asked if I was okay. I told him the story straight through once, then again slower when he asked what the police said. He offered to comp my hours and said we could change my schedule, move me to mornings, or even transfer me a couple towns over. I nodded because he was trying, but I'd already decided. I typed out a short resignation and handed it to him. He asked me to sleep on it. I said I had, for years, in break rooms and cars and back offices. And this was it for me. I'm never working alone on a night shift again. I don't care how much they pay. About 8 years ago, I was working night shifts at a small regional hospital on the 3rd floor where the post-op patients stayed. My shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights got quiet after midnight. Lab draws, vitals, charting, repeat. It worked for me because I was in nursing school and the hours let me hit morning lectures if I chugged enough coffee. That night felt even slower. Only 4 patients on the whole wing, which was odd for a weekday. 2 out cold after routine surgeries, 1 older lady propped up with a paperback and her glasses sliding down her nose, and then the guy in 407, a middle-aged man with a cast and a drain, who was glued to his cell phone like it was oxygen. He kept taking calls. Loud ones. Not, "I'll keep it down," loud, but, "I'm in a bar and I want everyone to hear me," loud. I asked him twice, then 3 times, to keep it down. He'd smile in that polite but not way and say, "Sure, nurse," and then go right back to it. On the 4th pass, he snapped, "It's my phone," and turned his back on me. Fine, I don't babysit adults. I logged my note, patient education performed, patient declined, and went back to the station. Around midnight, his voice changed. He wasn't just talking, he was arguing. Not a single rant. It was pauses, then explosions. I could hear bits over the hum from the ice machine. I said, "Not here." "No." "Number." "Are you even listening?" I stayed seated. I knew better than to step into a domestic mess I couldn't fix at 12:10 a.m. without a doctor's order or a reason. I checked vitals for the other 3, printed a MAR, and told myself to let him burn off steam. The floor was quiet otherwise. I like quiet. At 1 a.m. I started med rounds. When I got to 407, the door was cracked and the lights were off, which was weird because he hated the dark. He'd told me earlier the hallway lights bugged him. I knocked on the frame and peeked in. He was standing at the window with his back to me, shoulders hunched, hands at his sides. Street light halos from the parking lot lit him like a cutout. He was swaying, barely, and muttering. I couldn't make out the words. He didn't respond to the knock, so I kept it practical. "Need anything for pain?" I asked. "It's been 4 hours." He turned very slowly. The light from the hall fell across his face, and it wasn't angry, not exactly. It was wrong. A stretched smile like someone told him how to smile and he was trying it on. His eyes weren't with me. They tracked a spot over my shoulder like there was something standing behind me. My scalp prickled. He didn't talk, so I filled the silence with the only safe thing left. "Okay, I'll come back in a bit." I stepped out and pulled the door shut, but not tight. Enough to mark that I'd been there. Not enough to trap myself if I had to go in fast. I walked straight to the station, sat down, and pulled up the hallway camera. I don't watch cameras for fun, but I wanted to know where he was, because that smile felt like a bad forecast. 30 seconds later, there he was on the feed. Room 407, door opening. Him slipping into the hall and moving slow but steady in my direction, the swaying more pronounced. I stood up before he reached the corner. "Policy says post-op patients don't ambulate without assistance, especially with drains." I stepped into the hall with a neutral face and that calm voice we all use. "Hey, let's get you back to bed. If you need to walk, we can grab a walker." He stopped, stared. Same smile, same empty eyes. Up close, I could see sweat along his hairline and the edges of tape lifting on his dressing. I kept a half step back, because you learn that the hard way sometimes. "What do you need?" I asked. He lunged for my wrist. Not a stumble, straight for it, hard. His fingers dug in and lit up my whole forearm. "They're in the walls," he whispered. His mouth barely moved. I could feel his breath on my knuckles. "They crawl through the vents. They think I don't hear it, but I hear it. I hear all of it." "Okay," I said. "Quiet. No sudden moves." I tried to rotate my wrist like I was taught, thumb to the weak point of his grip, but he squeezed harder. I glanced down the hall toward the adjacent wing and raised my voice a notch. Not a scream, just enough. "Jen," he kept whispering, "don't let them take the screws. They take the screws out and then it opens. It opens and—" "Jen," I repeated louder. Her door swung open like she'd been standing there, which she probably had because that's what we do for each other. "You good?" Jen said, already moving. He felt the shift in the situation, and his hand loosened just enough for me to pull free. The marks on my wrist were white, already blooming red underneath. He stepped back without blinking, turned on his heel, and headed for the stairwell door like he'd mapped it. Not a run. Fast walk, shoulders set, eyes forward. "Stairs," Jen said, already grabbing her radio. "Post-op," I said. Pointless detail, nerves making me literal. We fell in behind him at a safe distance, close enough to keep him in sight, far enough not to spook him into falling. I keyed my radio twice and got the static pop. "Security to 3rd floor, patient elopement towards south stairwell," I said, breathing measured because I didn't want the dispatcher to hear that my heart was pounding. He pushed through the stairwell door without looking back. Me and my coworker followed him, calling for security on our radios. We took the stairs fast but not reckless, calling out that we were hospital staff and he needed to stop so he would not fall. He kept the same quick walk, right hand sliding the rail like he did not trust his balance. He reached the 2nd floor landing, glanced back once like he expected someone else behind us, and kept going. On the 1st floor, he hit the bar on an emergency door and the alarm went off. He pushed into the admissions lobby, which was empty except for dark monitors and a mop bucket tipped on its side. We reached the lobby maybe 20 seconds later. He was gone. There is a hallway to the left that leads to imaging and a hallway to the right to the cafeteria, plus the vestibule to the main entrance. All of it was quiet. We split without a debate because that is what you do. I took left, Jen took right, and I radioed that we had a patient elopement on the 1st floor with an alarmed exit. Security said they were on their way. I checked imaging first, stuck my head into the MRI prep room and the empty waiting area, then the bathroom. Nothing. Security showed in under a minute, one guard I knew and another who was new. We did a sweep. Bathrooms, supply closets, the locked door to the old records room, even under the admissions desks. I kept telling them he was in hospital pajamas and slippers, so he would stand out. But the lobby is not big, and there are not a lot of places to hide. The guard checked the camera feed from the emergency exit. It showed him push through. Then the exterior camera blinked to static. "Been like that all week," the guard said, which made the detective glare later. We went back up to his room to see if he had circled around, which was not impossible. Everything was still there. His phone was on the tray table with a charging cable coiled beside it. His wallet was in the top drawer, and his folded street clothes sat on the chair. No ID was on him. Nothing in the pockets except a crumpled receipt and a pack of gum. His chart was open to the post-op orders. Pain control, ambulation with assistance, diet advance as tolerated. No psych history, no consult notes, nothing except a routine appendectomy and normal labs. About 30 minutes later, the police arrived. We gave statements and pulled up what we could for them. They took his belongings to log as property and asked permission to power his phone. We said yes, and our charge nurse signed. They scrolled through recent calls. The last outgoing call was at 9 to a family contact. Nothing after that except the alarm events and our call to security. They asked if he had said anything about leaving. I told them about the vents and the walls and how hard he had squeezed. The officer wrote for a long time and did not look impressed by any of it, but he was not rude. He was never found. His family filed a missing person report, and there were no leads. The hospital's review found no med errors, and the detective suggested stress psychosis, but nobody was sure. The exit camera had been broken for 2 weeks, and nobody saw him leave the grounds. Since then, I am extra cautious, and I do not stay alone with patients. Sometimes that look and that smile show up when I close my eyes. About a year ago, I rented an Airbnb apartment in Portland for a week because my college friend Jessica was getting married. The place was on the ground floor of an old brick building on a quiet street, which seemed perfect since I wouldn't have to haul luggage upstairs. The owner lived out of state and rented the unit full-time, so it had that impersonal feel. Bare walls, cheap couch, random pans, no photos. I was unpacking that first evening when there was a knock. An older woman, maybe 60, stood there with a plate of cookies. She introduced herself as Barbara from apartment 4 downstairs and said she always welcomed temporary tenants. I thanked her for the cookies, set them on the counter, and locked the door when she left. The next day was fittings, errands, and meeting other bridesmaids at a downtown restaurant. I came back around 11, half asleep already. Shoes off, lights out. I just settled when someone started pounding on the door, fast and too loud for the hour. Through the peephole, I saw Barbara again, now holding a plastic food container like a lunchbox. She called, not a whisper. I made dinner and there's plenty. It was nearly midnight. I told her through the door that I was already in bed and not feeling well. She asked if I wanted her to leave it by the door. I said no, thank you. She stood there long enough that I felt the silence. Then her footsteps moved away, stopped in the hallway for a while, and finally went downstairs. It felt inappropriate, but I told myself some people are just lonely and pushy about it. I double-checked the deadbolt and went back to bed. The following 2 days were non-stop. Bachelorette stuff, a rehearsal at the venue, dinner with the groom's family. I did laundry in the building basement in between. Both times, Barbara turned up. The first time she arrived with a big bottle of detergent and set it down next to mine. "Use this," she said, like a suggestion that wasn't a suggestion. She talked about other Airbnb guests leaving doors unlocked and how that invited problems. I nodded and kept my eyes on the washer. When the cycle ended, she reached for my wet clothes like she was going to help. I moved past her and transferred them myself. She watched me fold, commenting that some people stayed longer than they said. The second time, she didn't bring anything. She just hovered, asking questions while my dryer ran. "Do you have family here? How long are you staying? Where do you work? What time do you get in at night?" I answered vaguely. "Friends in town, a few days, office stuff, depends." She repeated, "Depends," like she was testing the word. I kept my phone in my hand and pretended to text. When the dryer buzzed, I grabbed everything warm and left it wrinkled in the basket. Barbara followed me to the elevator and told me to knock if I needed anything, even late. I said, "I won't." Thursday evening, I got back early and felt relieved to shut the deadbolt. I showered, brushed my teeth, and texted Jessica about speeches. I put my suitcase on a chair near the balcony door. The balcony was small and faced a shared courtyard. There was a path that cut along the ground floor patios and a gate out to the street. I kept the balcony door locked, habit now. At about 10, I was in pajamas, scrolling through photos, when I heard a scraping outside. Slow, metal on metal, like something dragging against the railing. I set my phone down and listened. Another scrape, a little thud. I turned off the lamp so the glass wouldn't mirror the room, then stepped to the side of the curtain. The lock tab on the balcony door was down. I remember checking it when I put my bag there. The handle twitched again, twice, harder. I eased the curtain back a little, carefully. Barbara stepped into the courtyard light, braced one hand on the frame, and pulled the balcony handle slow and deliberate, trying to open it from outside. She didn't know I could see her. She kept working the balcony handle with slow, testing pulls, then a harder yank, then a pause like she was listening. I backed away from the window, kept low, and grabbed my phone off the counter. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped it. Calling 911 felt premature. She hadn't broken in or threatened me. So I called Jessica. She answered right away. I said, "She's on my balcony." "She's trying the door," Jessica said. "Lock everything. We're coming now. Stay away from the windows." For several minutes the handle twitched again, a soft scrape against the latch that made my mouth go dry. I stayed quiet and counted breaths. Then the sound stopped. Careful steps crossed the little patio. The metal stairs outside gave a small vibration through the floor, like someone going down slowly. I stayed on the kitchen tile with my back against a cabinet and the phone ready. When it went quiet, I didn't move. I watched the clock change once, twice. 20 minutes after my call, Jessica texted that they were outside. I let them in and locked up again. Kyle's face switched into work mode, calm, alert. I told him exactly what I'd seen. He asked simple questions: how long she was there, which direction she came from, anything in her hands, if I'd spoken to her. I said no, I hadn't said a word. "Okay," he said. "I'm going to talk to Barbara." He pointed at the door. "Don't open for anyone but us." Jessica sat with me while he went downstairs. He came back about 10 minutes later. He said Barbara told him she'd gotten confused about which balcony was hers, and she was looking for her cat, who'd slipped out earlier. He didn't call it believable, he just said that was her statement. "Do you want officers to take a report?" he asked. "Yes," I said immediately. Jessica rubbed my shoulder and said, "We can put you in a hotel." Don't even argue, I didn't argue. I just kept staring at the balcony lock while we waited. 2 uniformed officers arrived soon after. Kyle had already called. They took my statement in the living room, then went to Barbara's unit, then found the building manager on the 2nd floor. I could hear voices in the hallway, but not the words. Jessica read me quick updates she got from Kyle's texts. Yes, Barbara had a cat. Yes, she'd lived there 18 years. No, there were prior complaints. No, there were witnesses to the balcony part. So it was my word and a cat story in the dark. In the end, no charges. One officer explained it straight. Elderly resident, long tenancy, an actual cat, no damage, no entry, competing accounts. He offered to flag extra patrols and said I could relocate if I didn't feel safe. That felt like permission to stop pretending I could handle sleeping there. Jessica already had a hotel picked near the venue. Kyle said he'd follow us once they wrapped and text me the incident number. I nodded and finally stood up. My knees buzzed like I'd run somewhere. I packed fast. No folding, just tossed everything into the suitcase and zipped it. I didn't look at the balcony again. Jessica picked up the plate of cookies and dropped it down the trash chute without saying anything. We took the elevator. On the sidewalk, I ordered a ride share. I messaged the Airbnb owner. "Security concern, I'm leaving early." He sent back an apology and said he'd speak to the manager. I didn't wait for more. The car pulled up. I got in and didn't look back at the building. The hotel was plain, but the lock clicked loud, and that was enough. We were up early for wedding stuff anyway, so I tried to stay in the schedule. I went back to the apartment once, daytime, with Jessica to grab the rest of my things. The manager caught us in the lobby and said Barbara had never caused trouble, that she volunteered at the library and watched packages when it snowed. He said he'd remind tenants about patios and balconies, and that he was sorry I'd felt unsafe. I never figured out what Barbara actually wanted from me. Maybe it was old age and confusion mixed with nosiness, or maybe she was very lonely and had learned that short-term renters were easier to push past normal boundaries. I still think about the silhouette on the balcony and how easy it would have been to miss it or to forget the lock. I replay the knock the first night, the detergent in the laundry room, the questions about when I came home. I keep wondering if I was her first target or just the first one to make a fuss. I work as a nurse in the intensive care unit, night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights a week. The work is exhausting, and after a shift, I can't just go to bed. Too much adrenaline, too many images in my head. Alarms, compressions, family faces. About a year ago, I started riding my bike after work to burn it off. I'd get home around 7:30, change into athletic clothes, grab my road bike, and take the waterfront path. Simple route, straight along the river for 8 kilometers, turn at the lighthouse, come back. That time of morning the waterfront is mostly empty. Some fishermen, a few people sleeping on benches. I liked the openness. I could see far in every direction, and it made me feel in control after nights where I wasn't. I listened to podcasts, crime stories, ironically. The routine helped push the night out of my head. Pedal, breathe, listen, repeat. I'm careful by nature. I lock my bike with 2 locks, memorize plate numbers in the lot. The path has working lights in sections, and where it doesn't, I keep my head on a swivel. The river is a straight line, no blind corners, and that makes it feel fair. If something is wrong, you see it coming. My coworkers teased me for exercising after nights. Go sleep, you maniac. But it worked. 25 minutes out, 25 back, stretch, shower, blackout curtains, sleep. One Wednesday in early October, I got home around 3 in the morning instead of the usual time. Slow unit, reduced staffing, charge let 2 of us leave early. I wasn't tired yet, not even close. I changed, grabbed my bike, and headed to the waterfront. It was darker than usual, clouds covering the moon, but the lampposts along the path were on. I turned on my favorite Unsolved Crimes podcast, one I'd saved for the ride, and started my route at a calm pace. Cadence steady, gears light. I told myself I'd only go to the lighthouse and back, then try to sleep. Around the 3rd kilometer, I noticed a woman jogging on the pedestrian lane that parallels the bike path. Not unusual. Lots of runners like the cooler hours. But something about her made me look twice. Her pace was absolutely even, almost clipped. Arms swung like metronomes. Head didn't move. No scanning, no glancing down at her feet, just eyes locked forward under her hood. I kept riding. She kept running beside me, maintaining the same distance, maybe 15 meters to my right and slightly ahead. I figured it was coincidence. Our speeds matched, that's all. I did a quick internal inventory, front light bright, rear light blinking, phone in the right jersey pocket, pepper spray in the left. I nudged my speed up a hair to test the gap. The distance stayed the same. Okay. Coincidence again, probably. I told myself to stop being weird. A lot of people lock into a pace and hold it. There was a lone fisherman by the railing, and I used him as a marker. Pass him, count to 10, see if she holds relative position. She did. I could hear my podcast host describing a suspect's route, but the words stopped landing. My brain was listening for footsteps, for breath that wasn't mine. Up ahead, a slow cyclist drifted into the middle of the bike lane. I shoulder-checked, signaled, and accelerated to pass. The woman accelerated too. Not a delayed adjustment, immediate. We cleared the cyclist, and I dropped back to my previous speed. She dropped too, the same fraction, preserving that 15-meter gap like it was taped to the ground. The hairs on my arms lifted. Precision like that doesn't happen by accident for long. I tried to see her face as we moved under a lamp. Hood up, dark clothing, no reflective strips, no earbuds that I could spot. I kept catching the outline of her jaw but not features. No phone armband, no water bottle, nothing to break the silhouette. My chest started that tight feeling I get in codes when the numbers aren't lining up. I paused my podcast with a thumb tap. The sudden quiet made the river and my chain the only sounds. I kept my cadence smooth. At the 5th kilometer, there's a public drinking fountain. I braked there, quick but not screeching, swung off the saddle, and rolled the bike onto the concrete, pretending the stop was routine. I took a sip I didn't need. My eyes were on her without turning my head. She ran past me about 50 meters, then stopped near the railing like she was stretching her calf. The pose was textbook, heel down, knee straight. If you don't notice that her head was turned toward me. She didn't hide it. She didn't make it obvious either. Just a slight tilt, like people do at bus stops when they're pretending not to look. We stayed like that for maybe a minute. I adjusted my helmet strap. She switched to the other calf. I put my bottle back, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand to buy a second. There was no chatter, no footsteps of other runners coming up, no gulls. Just the quiet slap of water and faint traffic on the bridge behind us. The distance was wrong. If she'd truly been stretching, she could have done it anywhere. Why there? Why in sync? I angled my bike toward the path like I might remount, but I didn't swing my leg over. She didn't move either, except for that fake stretch. I pretended to check my rear light with my thumb. My pulse felt too loud. I remember thinking that if I started riding, she'd start running, and we'd be locked in again. She straightened, shook out her hands once, and kept her head turned my way. I held the handlebars tighter than I needed to. I felt the hair rising on the back of my neck. This wasn't coincidence. She was following me. The decision hit hard and clean. I swung my leg over the bike, clipped in, and turned back before the lighthouse, 3 kilometers early. I didn't look at her when I pushed off. I kept my face neutral, eyes on the path. I built speed to a firm tempo, checking quick over my shoulder like I was watching for traffic. She turned too, same moment as me, and settled into that same slot off my right, a fixed point on the map that refused to move. I pressed harder. The chain hummed. My bike computer ticked up. I don't usually sprint on the way back, but I wanted distance. I passed another early runner and a guy with a backpack. Every time I checked, she was there, matching like she had a tether to my wheel. I bumped to my top gear and went all in. Legs burned, lungs hot, no pacing now, just a straight line home. The wind at my ears ate most sounds, but in the brief gaps between lamp poles, I tried to hear if she was working as hard as I was. Nothing. No footfalls, no breathing, just my own mess. 25 kilometers an hour is easy to hit on a road bike with effort. Holding it for long is work. A normal runner doesn't. I told myself it had to be an e-bike I couldn't see, or a scooter in the dark pedestrian lane. Every time I glanced, it was still a single figure in a hood. No handlebars, no lights. Same 15 meters, same angle, same wrongness. The path entrance came up. I didn't signal. I cut straight to the lot, hopped the small curb, and rolled fast to my car. I popped the trunk with my fob while I was still moving, dumped the bike in sideways. No folding, No careful anything, slammed the trunk, dove into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands shook on the wheel as I started the car. Reverse, out, forward. I checked the rear view. She was at the path entrance, under the first light, facing me. No chasing now. Just standing there, hood up, body still, head tilted like she was reading my plate. I didn't wait. I pulled onto the road and didn't look again until I hit the next intersection. At home, I locked the door twice, slid the deadbolt, and went window to window. Curtains closed, sticks in the sliding tracks, chain on. I propped my bike against the wall, still smeared with grit from the trunk. Sleep didn't come. I watched the hallway from the couch and listened for nothing. My phone sat face up in case I needed to dial without thinking. I checked the peephole 3 times, even though that didn't make sense. When birds started up, I felt stupid for being scared of a jogger, but the feeling didn't change. Around 9, my roommate drifted out of her room. She saw me awake and said, "You look wrecked. Did you stay late?" I told her everything while I made coffee I didn't want. I told it straight. The turn, the speed, the matching. She leaned on the counter and made a face. Maybe it was just another runner, or a bike with no light. You said it was dark. You're wiped, you know? I said maybe. I also said I've stared at monitors in the worst moments and known when numbers don't lie. She asked if I wanted to file something. With who? I said. What do I even say? The next nights I changed my routine. I rode the park loop near the house, bright lamps, short circle, people always around. 1 kilometer per loop, over and over. Boring is fine. I kept the pepper spray clipped to my waistband. I texted my roommate when I left and when I got back. I set my phone to share location during rides, which I should have done earlier anyway. My legs felt the same burn as the river, but I never let myself get too far from other bodies or an exit. Sometimes, driving to work at night, I pass the waterfront entrance. I look down the path as long as the light allows. I keep my hands at 10 and 2. I don't stop. I don't slow. My roommate still says to report it, but report what? Someone ran near me on a public path and I got scared. No threat spoken, no touch. Nothing a form will handle. What I can't shake is how she moved exactly with me and turned the instant I turned. I can't prove the speed. I can only say I won't be alone out there again. After my divorce last year, I decided to completely change my life and signed up for an Ironman triathlon scheduled in 8 months. The plan kept me from spiraling. My younger brother Kevin jumped in as my training partner, partly because he wanted to help, partly because he hates seeing me idle. We met 3 times a week for 12-kilometer bike rides along the Mill Canal Trail. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. Flat stretches for cadence work, a couple of steep climbs that stopped you from lying to yourself. We usually hit it after lunch, when I got out of the architecture firm, and Kevin finished his morning shift at the firehouse. 6 weeks of the same loop gave us a rhythm. Push the first climb, back off near the dog park, sprint the last kilometer, and gave us a pattern for the weird things too. It started with the woman in the black baseball cap and dark sunglasses. We saw her the first Monday, then again Wednesday, then Friday, always at kilometer 3 by the old stone bridge. She didn't run. She didn't bike. She stood there, stretching her calves against the parapet, sipping from a silver bottle, looking at her phone. The first week, Kevin waved. No response. The second week, he muttered, "All right, secret agent." The third week, he said maybe she was rehabbing a knee and needed a landmark. I said maybe. She never seemed sweaty. No gym bag. Just the hat, the shades, the same black leggings, like a uniform. By week 5, we were joking about her being a mile marker statue that someone forgot to nail down. Kevin tapped his watch and said, "She's got better attendance than you." I said, "I'm mid-taper," and he snorted because I clearly wasn't. Still, I kept glancing when we passed. She'd angle away, thumb scrolling. If Kevin called out afternoon, there was a pause, like she was deciding whether we existed, and then nothing. She wasn't hostile. She just didn't care. What made it stick in my head was the consistency. Rain spit? She was there. We started late? She was there. We backed it up to 2 p.m. or pushed to 6. There she was at the same spot, doing the same routine. Kevin said maybe she'd buried treasure under the bridge and had to guard it. Then he said, more serious, or she's meeting someone who keeps not showing. That felt closer to it, but I couldn't say why. She looked mid-40s, average build, quiet, harmless. But when we passed her, I'd feel my shoulders tense like I was counting down for a car to change lanes without signaling. I kept it to myself. Kevin would have laughed and told me to eat more carbs. On a Thursday around week 6, Kevin texted that he'd been pulled into a last-minute certification session and couldn't make it. I told him I'd ride anyway. It would be my first solo session on the canal since we started. I pulled up a little before 4, parked where we always park, did a quick stretch because I'm trying to be adult about injuries now, and rolled out. The first kilometer felt normal, legs tight then loosening, steady cadence, breathing under control. No music. I keep one ear on the trail for dogs and kids. The second kilometer, same. An older guy in a high-vis vest nodded as he passed. A couple pushing a stroller gave me space. I reached the mild incline before the bridge, shifted down, and focused on form, not power, like my coach drilled into me after the split. When I got to the stone bridge, she was there in her usual spot. The black cap's brim pulled low. She had one foot up on the parapet, stretching her quads, eyes on the water or on nothing. I did what I always do, and gave a little nod, because that's what you do on a trail when you see the same person a dozen times. No reaction. I didn't expect one. I pushed past, back to cadence. About a kilometer after the bridge, something felt wrong. The gears started hesitating under load. Not a clunk. More like a rubbery skip when I put pressure down. I backed off and tried a few clean shifts. Down 2, up 1, feather the lever. But the chain slipped again. It wasn't dramatic. Just enough to make me think about snapping a derailleur hanger and walking the bike back like an idiot. I pulled off to the side where the trail widens by a maintenance gate, swung a leg over, and crouched. Visually it looked fine. Derailleur cage straight, limit screws where I set them, chain clean enough. I tried the barrel adjuster a quarter turn counterclockwise, then another quarter, running the shifter to see if it caught. The adjustment helped a little, not enough. I glanced back the way I'd come to make sure I wasn't blocking anyone. Movement flickered in the corner of my eye. I looked up and saw black cap and sunglasses, her, on a bicycle, closing the distance fast. For a half second, my brain didn't connect it. A minute ago, she was leaning on a parapet with no bike anywhere near her. I hadn't seen one stashed by the railing. There hadn't been a rack or a lock or even a second person. Now she was on a mat frame I didn't recognize, seated upright, hands light on the bars. I stood, one hand still on my shifter cable, and it hit me how fast she was covering ground. Not sprinting fast, effortless fast. I know that section by heart. It's a gradual climb. I use it to work on consistency because it punishes surges. She didn't surge. She floated. No heavy breathing. No side to side. She didn't even look at me as she blew by some walkers 20 meters back. She didn't weave. She was pedaling with such ease, like she was going downhill, but the trail was actually climbing upward at that point. I straightened up and watched her. She flew past without turning her head and kept going up the trail. Something in the way she moved was wrong. No bounce, no wobble from effort. Just this smooth, steady motion like a machine set to one speed. Her eyes never tracked left or right. It felt like she wasn't riding so much as following a line only she could see. My stomach went cold. Training didn't matter anymore. Finishing didn't matter. I wanted my car. I turned the bike around and headed back toward the lot. The shifting fought me on every rise. I stayed out of the saddle to keep momentum and told myself not to look back, then looked back anyway. Empty trail. No cap, no sunglasses, nothing but an older couple way down near the bend. I pushed harder. My quads started to burn and the chain slipped once like it wanted to jump. I eased off just enough to keep it from popping and kept rolling. The bridge came into view. No one at the parapet. The spot where she always stood looked wrong only because it was empty. I didn't stop. I crossed and tucked into the last straight, watching the tree line break to show the parking lot through the fence. I let myself think, okay, overreacted. You're fine. It's fine. The lot wasn't fine. My Toyota sat crooked. The front and rear tires on the driver's side were collapsed flat, rims almost touching the asphalt. It looked like the car had sunk into the ground. I coasted up confused, then angry. I hadn't been away long. 10, 15 minutes. I swung off the bike and did the dumb thing and pressed a tire with my hand, like that would tell me anything. Completely dead. I set my bike against the bumper to think. Something else was off. The handlebar mount looked empty. The little GPS unit I leave clipped on was gone. It's secured with a pinch tab. You have to know it's there to take it cleanly. My eyes jumped to the cabin. The windows were closed, doors locked, nothing broken. The cup holder was empty too. I keep a blue sports bottle there. Gone. The car was locked, no broken glass, no pry marks. My stuff was just gone. I called a tow and then called Kevin. He picked up, asked what happened, and said he was coming. While I waited, I checked the sidewalls again. Tiny, neat punctures, like an awl. Kevin rolled in under 20 minutes and asked if I was okay. I said I was mad. He said it looked deliberate. 2 officers arrived before the truck. They photographed the tires, took my statement, and wrote down her description. I told them about the sudden bike, the speed, the timing. One said it would be logged as vandalism unless video surfaced. The other said a thin tool was used and there were no cameras. I asked about prints. He said there was nothing to lift on rubber. They gave me a case number and moved on. The tow loaded the Toyota. Kevin offered to follow me and suggested we ride the trail together next week to see if she showed up. I told him I was done with that place. I moved my training indoors and asked my coach to adjust the plan. He didn't like it, but understood. Sometimes I replay it and try to rationalize it, but the timing keeps killing that story, and I won't risk proving it ever again. When I was 28, I worked night dispatch at a warehouse and lived in an apartment near the industrial zone. The area wasn't the nicest, but it was quiet at night. Just empty parking lots, warehouse hangars, and an abandoned railroad bridge. I had a German Shepherd named Rex, who I walked every evening after my shift, around midnight when the streets were completely empty. The route was always the same. We'd walk along the fence of an old factory, then under the bridge and back along a dirt road by the vacant lot, about 40 minutes at a relaxed pace. Rex was a trained dog, calm and obedient, never barked without reason and wasn't afraid of the dark, so I felt safe even in a place like that. There were almost no streetlights there, just occasional floodlights over warehouse gates. But I knew every pothole in the road and didn't even bring a flashlight. I liked the routine. After 6 hours of radios and clipboards, it cleared my head. You start to notice the small, predictable things. How the wind always pushed dust across the same corner, that one broken pallet that never moved, the squeak in the chain link near the old factory gate. Sometimes I'd talk to Rex out loud without thinking. Heal. Easy. Leave it. If I passed a trucker waiting out his hours, I'd get a nod, and I'd nod back. No drama. The night security at the plastics place knew me. He'd call, "Midnight Patrol?" And I'd joke, "Rex is Union." That's the vibe. Nothing fancy. Just empty space and a dog that listened. If there was anything that ever bugged me, it was the bridge. Not in a big way. Just that it was tall for something forgotten, and you couldn't see the top from where we walked under it. People used to tag the concrete. Sometimes cans rolled around and made weird little clinks in the dark. I told myself teenagers came in the afternoons because I never saw anyone at midnight. Still, I didn't linger there. We'd pass under, I'd keep my pace. Rex would give the ground one sniff and move on. That night I'm telling you about was a Tuesday mid-October, cold wind blowing scraps of newspaper across the asphalt. Me and Rex went out as usual. I put on a hooded jacket and sneakers. The dog ran beside me on a long leash. Everything was normal until we got to the bridge. It was an old structure about 60 feet high where train tracks used to run, and now there were just weeds and broken asphalt underneath. Rex suddenly stopped at the entrance under the bridge, pricked up his ears and whimpered, which was very strange for him because he never acted like that. I tried to pull the leash to keep going, but he dug in and wouldn't move, just whimpered louder and looked up somewhere at the bridge structures. I looked up too, but didn't see anything, just the silhouettes of rusty beams against the dark sky and a weak streetlight on the other side of the bridge. "Rex," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. He wasn't stubborn like this. He knew heel, he knew pace, and he knew I meant it. He just didn't care. He planted himself and stared up, paws spread, nails grinding on the grit. I waited maybe 10 seconds, listening. Wind, a loose metal sign tapping somewhere, the distant hum from the highway. Nothing else. I said, "Okay, we're not doing this," and took one step back. He stepped back too, tail low, still watching the beams like there was a person up there he didn't trust. I got a little uneasy and decided to go around the bridge and take a different path, even though it added 15 minutes to our walk. Rex calmed down as soon as we moved away from the bridge and walked normally again, but I still felt some kind of anxiety. We went around the vacant lot from the other side, past an abandoned office, and I decided not to walk under that bridge at night anymore. Maybe there were homeless people or something else there. When we got home, I poured Rex some water. He drank and went to sleep, and I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. Kept thinking about why the dog acted so strange. The question wasn't dramatic, just practical. Dogs don't whine at nothing. Maybe copper wiring thieves. Maybe kids on the upper platform messing around. I pictured someone dropping a bottle. I pictured Rex lunging and both of us getting cut. It was enough to keep me awake. Around 3, I finally drifted. I had an early alarm set for nothing important. Laundry, emails, the usual adult chores. But it didn't wake me. The sun did. The apartment felt too bright for October. That bleached out kind of light you get when the sky's just flat. The clock said 10:03. Rex lifted his head and thumped his tail once like, finally. I made coffee. I turned on the TV for noise. The local morning show was doing weather, then traffic, then it broke into a live shot and the banner at the bottom changed. Early that morning under the railroad bridge in our district, workers discovered the body of a man who jumped from the upper platform of the bridge the night before, sometime between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., police were checking surveillance cameras from nearby warehouses. I went cold because me and Rex were there around midnight, and I realized the dog sensed something I didn't see. Maybe it was the sound, a low thud carried under steel, or the smell, or maybe the body hadn't been found yet when we passed. The report said the man was 42, identity established, relatives notified, no signs of a struggle. Police were leaning towards suicide. It sounded so final and neat on TV. In my head it was messy, minute by minute, where we were, where he was. I sat down with my coffee and tried to rewind. Hood up, leash in my left hand, phone in my right jacket pocket. Rex whining at the beams. Me pulling once, then twice. We backed away. That was it. Nothing dramatic. But when I pictured the platform above, I started counting seconds without meaning to. If I had argued with Rex for one more minute, we might have been directly under it. If he'd pulled forward instead of back, same result. I didn't like the math of it. I called the non-emergency police line because that felt like what you're supposed to do. The operator sounded tired but calm. I said I'd been walking under the bridge between late night and after midnight, that my dog acted strange, that I didn't see anyone, and I wanted to make sure they had the timing. She thanked me, took my name, and said investigators already reviewed surveillance from the warehouses and a traffic camera. The subject arrived alone, climbed alone, and jumped. No one else was present, she said, reading it like a line item. I asked if they needed me to come in. She said it wasn't necessary. I asked if they knew the exact time. She said it fell in the same window they'd reported. "Thank you for calling," she said again. And that was the end of it. I texted my supervisor because the first thing people do at the warehouse is talk, and I didn't want the story to come through 3 people and land on my desk like gossip. He wrote back, "You good?" And I said, "Yeah, just weirded out." On my next shift, the security at Plastics called across the lot. "You hear about the bridge?" I said yes, kept it short, and he nodded like there wasn't anything else to say. I changed my route after that. No more underpass. I cut along the far side of the vacant lot and added the extra distance, no debate. It was more open, less convenient. Not exactly safer, but at least I didn't have to walk under anything. I started bringing a flashlight too, which I used to think was overkill. Not for the dark, my eyes were used to the dark, but for the small things you step over without seeing. Bottles, a coil of wire, a shoe. I noticed Rex looked up more often than before. Not fearful, just checking. I let him set the pace and didn't push. 2 days later, the city taped off the area around the bridge and left a patrol car there for a while. People dropped flowers near the fence. I avoided that block entirely. When coworkers asked if I'd gone by, I said no. Human nature wants to look, but I don't need images I can't put down. Sometimes I think about if Rex hadn't stopped, I might have kept going and seen something I shouldn't have seen. Maybe I would have heard it happen. Maybe I would have seen the fall and then stood there useless, or tried to call for help and watched nothing change. I don't know if I could have done anything because it was probably already over when we were there. But the thought that we walked by minutes before or after sticks in my head like a bad piece of tape. Since then, I always listen to Rex. If he slows down, we stop. If he looks away from a corner, we take the longer line. It's not mystical to me. I don't think he sees ghosts or any of that. Dogs notice the stuff we don't. Weight shifts, tiny sounds, air that smells wrong. That night he pulled me off a straight line I would have stayed on. And I'm grateful because even if the facts were simple and the police had their timeline, I don't want the sound, the image, or the paperwork that comes after living in my head for years. During the summer of 2023, I was working as a courier delivering electronics, and I had this regular route that included a pickup spot at this old shopping mall on the south edge of town. The mall was mostly dead. Half the stores had closed down and moved out, but there was still a FedEx drop-off point and a storage locker facility in the basement where businesses kept inventory. I'd go there maybe 3 times a week to pick up packages, usually laptops or tablets that needed same-day delivery to corporate clients. The storage area was down 2 flights of stairs past what used to be a food court, but was now just empty tables and chairs covered in dust. Health department had shut down all the restaurants except one Subway that barely stayed open. That particular night I got there around 9 p.m. because the shipment came in late. The mall closed at 10, but the storage facility had 24-hour access for couriers with key codes. Security guard at the front entrance was half asleep in his chair. Didn't even look up when I walked past him and headed for the basement stairs. I'm 26, and I usually don't spook easy, but the building always had this stale smell in the evenings, old grease and cleaning chemicals, that made me hurry a little. I waved at the empty Subway just out of habit. No one waved back. One of the overhead lights in the food court was buzzing like it was trying to die. The keypad for the basement door stuck on the 2 sometimes, which is dumb detail, but I remember jabbing it twice before it took. I told myself to be quick, grab the box, scan it in the app, back to the car, and done. If I finished fast, I could still make the downtown drop before the client got antsy and started calling dispatch. Downstairs was colder. The echo down there was weird because every sound felt closer than it was. My steps, the zipper on my courier bag, the clack of the lockbox when I pulled it out to check the code they texted me. I kept thinking about the security guard and how he didn't even glance at me. Not that I needed him to. It just stuck with me. A printed notice by the elevator said, "Maintenance, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., taped crookedly, like someone ripped it down and slapped it back up. I didn't think much of it then. The basement hallway with the storage units was dimly lit. Maybe half the fluorescent tubes were working, and a few were flickering on and off, making everything feel like a horror movie set. I found my assigned locker, punched in the code, grabbed the box with 3 laptops inside, and was about to head back upstairs when I heard fast footsteps coming from the connecting hallway that led to the old service corridors. Nobody should have been down there at that time. Maintenance crew left at 8 p.m. according to the schedule posted by the elevator. I froze and listened. The footsteps got closer, then stopped suddenly. Then I heard this scraping metal sound like someone trying to force open a locked door. My instinct said, "Get out of there." But the footsteps were between me and the stairs, so I looked around for somewhere to hide. There was this recessed area between 2 rows of storage units where they kept empty rolling carts for moving heavy boxes. Just a dark alcove maybe 4 feet deep. It was one of those decisions where you don't weigh pros and cons, you just move. I slid the unit door shut as quietly as I could, stepped into the recess, and nudged 2 carts aside to make space. The wheels squeaked and I winced, holding still until the squeak died. I killed the screen on my phone because the lock screen glow would be stupid bright in there. I remember thinking, I should text dispatch and say I'm delayed, but I didn't. I didn't want any sound. I squeezed myself between 2 of the metal carts and pressed my back against the cold concrete wall, still holding the laptop box against my chest. The alcove was deep enough that the hallway lights didn't reach all the way in. I could see the lit corridor about 10 feet away, but anyone walking past wouldn't see me unless they specifically looked into the shadows. My heart was pounding so loud I thought whoever was out there would hear it. Suddenly this guy burst into the hallway. He was wearing dark clothes, maybe in his mid-30s, hair all messed up, and his hands had cuts on them, dried blood on his knuckles. He started yanking on the storage unit doors, not trying to open them with codes, just pulling hard on the handles and making them rattle in their frames. He was growling or muttering something I couldn't make out, just angry sounds, and moving fast from one door to the next like he was searching for something, or just destroying things for the hell of it. He walked right past my hiding spot, maybe 6 feet away from where I was wedged between the carts. But he didn't look into the alcove because he was focused on the storage units. I held my breath, didn't move a muscle, just watched him go down the corridor, pulling and kicking at doors. The metal banging echoed through the basement. A whistle cut through it, and heavy footsteps hit the stairs. 2 security guards with flashlights came running, yelling for him to stop and get on the ground. He tried to run deeper into the service corridor, but they cornered him by a crossway and forced him down. He fought hard for a second, then folded when one guard pinned his shoulder. While they cuffed him, he kept yelling broken phrases that didn't make sense. I stayed put until I saw the cuffs, and then I stepped out, legs shaky, the box tipping in my hands. One guard swung his light toward me and asked if I was hurt. I said no. I hid when I heard him coming. They guided me to the wall so I was out of the way and told me to hang on a minute. The taller guard asked if I needed medical or wanted them to call someone. I said I was fine and set the box on a cart so I wouldn't drop it. He asked which unit I was assigned. I pointed, showed my courier badge and the pickup code on my phone, and told him I had to be in and out before 10. He nodded and told me to stand by the wall while they cleared the hallway. The other guard kept his flashlight on the guy's hands and radioed for police. The man on the floor kept muttering, short bursts like he was trying to remember a script and failing. I heard mine, wrong door, and something about keys. The guard near me said, "You're okay. Stay put." I watched him breathe, steady and slow, like he was trying to keep me calm by example. Police showed up about 10 minutes later and took him away in the back of a patrol car, still shouting random words. A sergeant walked me through a quick statement to get the basics. Another officer had me repeat it with more detail. Where I was, what I heard first, the order of the sounds. She asked the exact time I heard the footsteps. I checked my delivery app and gave her the timestamp from when I scanned the locker. She asked if I had video, and I told her I kept my phone dark so he wouldn't see me. They asked if he'd spoken to me directly. I said no. He never looked my way. An officer photographed the alcove and the carts and asked me to stand where I'd been. I felt stupid posing there, but I did it. They walked me through what they were checking. I showed them the alcove and the route from the stairs to my locker. An officer pointed out fresh scratches on a door frame and a bent handle that looked new. Another peered down the service corridor and said the exit sign was lit, but the alarm panel showed a fault. One of them told security to tape the area and start a log in case tenants reported missing items. I asked if I could go. They said yes, finish the pickup and head out, but to call dispatch if anyone tried to stop me. So I lifted the box, signed their contact form, and left. 2 days later, the mall manager called me and explained that the guy had been living in an abandoned section of the basement for about 2 months, coming and going through a service exit that was supposed to be alarmed, but the alarm had been broken since March, and maintenance never fixed it. He'd been stealing food from the dumpsters behind the closed restaurants and sleeping in one of the storage rooms that wasn't being used. The manager said they were installing new locks and cameras in the basement and hiring extra security for nights. He apologized, not very smoothly, and asked if I'd be willing to keep the route. I said I'd think about it, but I already knew the answer. I quit the courier job the next week and found an office position doing data entry, boring as hell. But at least I'm never alone in a dark basement at 9 p.m. anymore. I told my dispatcher I appreciated the work, but I needed something steadier and safer. He didn't argue. He just said, "I get it," and asked for my badge and the scanner by Friday. I turned in the uniform shirt and the key fob and watched another driver load the route I used to run. I still check doorways when I walk past them, and I flinch at the sound of rolling carts. Every time I drive past that mall, I think about how I was standing in that alcove in the dark while he walked past, And what would have happened if he'd seen me, or if I'd tried to run instead of hiding? I picture the space and feel my body lock up before my brain catches up. It was a normal night until it wasn't, and now I measure risk in small things. How far a door is from the stairs, whether a keypad sticks, whether a guard actually looks at you. I'm glad they fixed the locks and cameras, but I won't be the one to test them.